Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with Mitch Reed from No Dice, No Glory. How you doing, Mitch?
What's going on, Liz?
Well, I'm excited because we're here to introduce Joe Kelly. They are a Zenobia Award finalist and the designer of Molly House. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am doing great. So let's just start with the basics. Tell us about Molly House.
Okay, so Molly House is a game set in like 18th century London. So there were these kind of secret meeting places that would normally be something like maybe a coffee house or like the back room of a pub or something like that. And they were places where queer people could meet up and kind of, just live their lives kind of free from I guess the oppressive outside world. So around kind of the end of the 17th century, there's this group called the Society for the Reformation of Manners that pops up in London. And they are all about kind of enforcing all the moral laws that aren't really being enforced at the time. So things like trading on Sundays, that's a big no-no. And they're against sex work, but they're also like one of the things they're against is sodomy. So there's laws against sodomy at the time, and the death penalty is enforced for that. So that's kind of what these people were up against. So the game kind of casts the players as Mollies in a Molly house, and you're trying to put on festivities in the Molly house. So you're collecting stuff, you're putting on like drag balls, masquerades. They had like christening festivities so a lot of Mollies had their own kind of maiden names in the Molly house that they would use. So things like there was one called Dip Candle Mary. There was one called Princess Seraphina. All these really kind of cool, colourful names that they kind of referred to each other with. And when they got their Molly name, they would have gin kind of thrown in their face as a kind of christening ceremony. So you're putting all of these events on. But also while you're doing that, you're kind of creating a risk for yourself and for everyone else. So there's kind of increasing numbers of constables that come out onto the board, and you're kind of rolling dice, you're pushing your luck to see how much you can get away with. And then there's kind of mechanisms for getting arrested and trials and the outcomes of those. So that's the kind of broad overview of the game.
I've had
That's
gin
amazing.
thrown in my face, but for totally different reasons.
So mechanically, what kind of game are we looking at here? Is this going to be like a Euro game, or I mean, we've got some dice rolling. So what's our
it's a bit Eurogamey. So it's the kind of action selection thing is a worker placement game with there's kind of action cards, and they get dealt out every 2 rounds. So you've got kind of differing actions that come out. So things like putting on a festivity. Cruising is one of the things that you can do in the game as well. So that was one of the ways that people met each other at the time. So there's kind of 4 different places you can go cruising, and they might have different numbers of constables at them. But you're just kind of taking turns to do, you can do a major action and a minor action. And there's also this push your luck element. So the more rounds you stay in, the kind of more likely you are to get arrested as well. So there's kind of all these ways you're kind of building up risk to kind of build up joy. So kind of the main currency in the game, I guess, is joy. So you're putting on festivities to create joy, and there's a collective pool of joy. So when you put on festivities, you can put that in the collective pool to kind of try and keep everyone in the Molly house happy, or you can kind of keep some of it for yourself and your personal joy. And if there's not enough collective joy at the end of the game, then everyone's going to lose. If you don't have enough personal joy at the end of the game, then you're going to lose. And you also build up esteem, which is another kind of victory point kind of thing that serves as a tiebreaker at the end, if more than one player manages to get all of that together.
So my question is, tell us about the research process for this game, especially going back to that history. Not a lot of books are written about that. How difficult was it for you to do all the research?
Yeah, you're right. There's not that much out there. So there's kind of one major book, which is called Mother Clap's Molly House by Richter Norton. And there's another guy called Randolph Trambach who's done a lot of research around Molly houses. So I've been reading them quite extensively. And Richter Norton also keeps an online database of kind of primary sources. So all of the source material is either trial documents from the Old Bailey records mostly, and there's a few kind of clippings from newspapers around the time, which is a lot of kind of sensationalist articles about this kind of outrageous mollies and all the stuff that they're up to.
Not many first-person accounts, I guess, from based on what it sounds like.
Not many. So none by actual mollies themselves. So you've got kind of journalists who are writing these kind of tabloid pieces. There's an account by a robber called I think his name's James Dalton, who has written an account of his life in like 1728 or something, and he writes an account of going to a molly house in there. But yeah, the mollies themselves, they were all I think at least mostly they were working class people, so they didn't really keep accounts of what they were doing. They weren't writing any of it down. So it's an interesting topic. There's lots of kind of having to try and fill in the gaps in this historical record.
You actually said something interesting before we move on. I wanted to ask, you look at this period in England, and class was very evident in everyday life. So this was mostly a working class phenomena, as opposed to where you would have like-minded people congregate at the molly houses from different strata of society. I guess that still did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, potentially kind of, I think there's potential that like more upper class people were visiting the molly houses, but they definitely weren't like the everyday kind of members there. So a lot of the mollies were actually named after their profession. So there's like Orange Deb was an orange seller. Garter Mary sold garters. So yeah, there's lots of kind of evidence of what jobs they were doing, and they were not the aristocracy, for sure.
So just out of curiosity, we're talking about gatherings of queer people. Did that include people of both men and women, or is this still no women allowed?
I mean, that's a tricky question, because I think there's definitely trans women.
Yeah.
So Princess Serafina, for example, she's quite remarkable because there's kind of trial documents for her, but she's actually bringing a case against someone else who's tried to steal her clothes. So there's this whole court case of her, like, bringing a case against this guy who tried to steal her clothes, and then she brings in loads of character witnesses, and they're all referring to her as Princess Serafina, not by her given name. And there's what one of her neighbors says, I never knew she had another name other than Princess Seraphina. They're all calling her she and like Her Majesty and all this stuff. So I think there's a definite case that there were trans women, probably people that we would consider non-binary now. So
Mhm.
I think even kind of the common ideas of what it meant to be queer, I guess the term at the time was, they were kind of sodomite or molly. They were used interchangeably, but they were, Randolph Trumbach kind of says they were almost considered like a third gender. So they have very different ideas, I think, to how we think about it now of the classes of how gender and sexuality works.
A third gender. That's very progressive for England at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea because I mean, I don't think they mean it in the same way that we mean it now. But yeah, I think ideas about sexuality at the time, like there was no word for, like, there was no non-pejorative word, I guess, and I think Molly was probably meant as an insult, especially initially. Like it was actually initially a word for a female prostitute, which transferred over to the Mollies. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's really difficult to talk about Molly's kind of, I guess, using the language that we use now.
That is so fascinating. I guess the other question I had, so you brought this up, I'm really interested in it. So you're talking about these kind of difficult, I mean, it sounds like, we're talking about people who felt like maybe they didn't fit into society as it was, people who really don't get to tell their own story. They're showing up in court cases and have pejorative terms being used for them. But the currency in your game, the victory point title is joy. And what inspired you to choose that? I think that's a great idea. Where did it come from?
Well, my mentor in the Zenobia Award was Cole Worley. So one of the first things that he talked to me about was about kind of the idea of arguments and models in historical games. So my initial idea was that it was going to be kind of one player was playing the Society for the Reformation of Manners, the other player was playing the Molly House, and it would be this kind of two-player battle. But then I kind of started thinking about what was actually interesting about the history, and I was thinking about kind of I guess the risks people take and why they take them, because I mean the death penalty is there. Why do people go out cruising to meet each other when there's constables out who might kind of catch them? And the reason is they didn't really have a choice. It was either that or just kind of not live their lives authentically, I suppose. So I kind of modeled it as you're doing these things to kind of create this joy, which you're either kind of creating for yourself or you're creating for the community. And I guess I liked that idea of, I guess that's a model that also probably resonates with a lot of queer and trans people today, of like, yeah, why do people come out now? I mean, things are a lot better, obviously, but there's still a lot of hate out there. There's still a lot of oppression in the world, but yeah, people still come out because that's the better option, even if it's kind of got this inherent risk. So that's also why I went for a kind of push your luck element to the game, to kind of try and create that idea of risk and reward.
Had the Molly houses been successful in changing social norms back then? Would the game have then had how you affected society and politics as opposed to joy, which I think is brilliant, by the way?
Yeah, potentially. I think, I mean, there probably is a game to be made about more recent UK history around kind of LGBTQ rights. And I know Taylor Schuss is making a game about Stonewall at the moment, which
Mhm.
is really exciting.
I gotta get
Yeah,
that
I
one.
mean, yeah, it's I've had a play of it. It's really good. Yeah. But I think what's interesting about this time is actually it's almost the start of like the modern oppression of queer people. If you look at the records before like the kind of late 17th century, you've had the buggery laws of like 1533 have been in place for what nearly 2 centuries and only been used like a handful of times. And then you get suddenly this Society for the Reformation of Manners comes out, and you get I think you get kind of tens of cases, maybe even more than that over this period of like, I don't know, 20, 30 years. So the kind of most famous case is Mother Clap's Molly House. So there were kind of undercover constables who were came into the Molly House. They were kind of collecting evidence, and they had informers kind of among the Mollies as well, who were working with them. And they raided Mother Clap's Molly House. They kind of arrested, I think, 20 or 30 people. They didn't have cases against most of them, but 4 of them got the death penalty, and were hanged. And Mother Clap, who ran the Molly House, was found guilty of keeping a disorderly house, and she was kind of put on the pillory. And I think she got really injured, and nothing is heard of her after that. So yeah, it's almost the opposite of this kind of queer liberation story. It's I guess the aim of the game is to avoid the raid happening and just try and keep things going and try and live as best you can.
Yeah.
So I love just the concept of a game about taking your joy where you find it because you deserve it, regardless of what anybody else says. And it also leads me to the question of how's the process of designing this game brought you joy? And what part of, I think you've got a special soft spot for Princess Serafina, but are there any other like very good tidbits that just really warmed your heart while you're doing this research?
I mean, this process has definitely brought me joy, and it's definitely been incredibly difficult as well. Just this is the first game I've designed, and it's really been kind of quite a grueling experience, but I'm really glad I did it, and I'm really happy with kind of where it's got to. I guess there's the story of how Mother Clap's Molly House kind of came to be invaded. So basically there was this falling out between this couple, Mark Partridge and William Harrington, were clearly lovers at some point, and then Mark Partridge for some reason felt betrayed by William Harrington and was going off like kind of spouting about it to whoever would listen at pubs, and a constable happened to overhear him talking about it, and basically he kind of offered himself up to become an informer, and I think he informed against about 20 people, and yeah, he's a piece of work, but they never found William Harrington, so he got away. He got out of it.
How many people from the Molly House were put to
death? So it's an interesting question, because it was actually relatively difficult to charge someone with like sodomy proper. So you had to have
Witnesses.
some.
Yeah.
You had to have either a first-hand witness or medical evidence. I'm sure you can guess what that might be.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were charged with assault with the intent to commit sodomy, which would get you a prison sentence and then pillory. But even those people, I guess, because a lot of people died on the pillory, unfortunately, at the time, they were kind of really badly pelted, and people died in prison as well. There was jail fever going around, and I don't know, any kind of violence could happen to you in there as well, I guess. So
Yeah.
But yeah, in the records, I did have a look through kind of just the 1720s. I think maybe about 20 people died over that time, with most of them being kind of the latter half of that period.
So sort of back to the Zenobia process, what inspired you to take part? And you said this is your first game. What got you to make the leap into game design?
So I first heard about it on the weekly news on Shut Up and Sit Down. So thanks to Tom and Ava for that. So I heard about it, and then I kind of started thinking about if I were to make a game, what it would be. And I looked up, I think BGG has like a LGBTQ tag or something like that. And I looked up the games on that, and it was honestly severely lacking in anything. Like, even I think there was one kind of proper board game, which is a Taiwanese board game. It's kind of like I think it's called Dare to Love. It's a fantasy game about kind of fighting oppression, and all of the characters in it are LGBT in some way. Aside from that, I think there's like a Cards Against Humanity style thing, but it's queer. So I was like, well, there's got to be more game ideas out there. So yeah, I kind of started thinking about Molly houses. I'd heard about them before, did some more research into them, and entered the awards. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
That's amazing. And I know the award has a grueling pace. I mean, it feels like it's been so long because it's been like a year, but that's not a very long time in terms of game design, anything. So
all the other interviewers were saying, oh my God, it's so rough to do it in a year. And I happen to agree with them.
Yeah.
So, but did you feel like the process breakdown was helpful? Starting with proposal and then rules and then prototype.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the proposal helped me to get all of my ideas kind of in order, even if I kind of diverted away from them in the end. I guess the kind of rules part was slightly strange because I hadn't I didn't have a game at that point, and I just kind of typed up some rules and was like, oh, that'll do. But apart from that, yeah, it's all been really good. It's all been really positive. And I mean, Cole's just been an amazing mentor. He's given me loads of his time. I know he's really busy, so that's been amazing. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, this game wouldn't exist without the Zenobia Awards. So yeah, I mean, it's all been worth it for sure.
So going forward, and this is a question I'm really interested in, is, this game probably be very popular within the LGBTQ community. Are you hoping for a big response, positive response from outside the community? Because I think just how you're talking about the game, this is an amazing educational game. What are your thoughts on, it kind of having a popularity outside of that community?
I mean, I really hope that it does. Yeah, if it gets picked up and published, I really hope that all kinds of people are going to play it and learn about this history, because I think it's really underrepresented, and it's really interesting. It kind of shows, I think it shows that, I guess, the history of the modern kind of queer movement goes back a lot further than I think a lot of people would expect. So, I mean, I've had positive responses from non-members of the LGBTQ community, and who've said it's been really enlightening. So I really hope it inspires people to go out and learn more about it. And I hope
your
more
fellow
people...
contestants really like the game, and because we know you guys have been talking.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
And so I went out with Akar last Friday because I was his mentor, and I go, so what games are you really excited about? And then we've asked that in every podcast. You're going to get asked soon. And Molly House always seems to come up. And I just looked. It's one of the games I have to judge for the finals, and I'm excited to play it because I just think the concept's awesome.
Yeah, we've all been talking. We've all showed each other our games. They all sound amazing. I'm going to buy every single one of them. So, yeah, I'm so excited for all of the Zenobia finalists. To be honest, all of the concept proposals. I'll buy all of those too. I'm going to buy them all.
Which leads us to one of the last questions Liz asked.
Did I ask? This is your question.
We've been switching off.
But basically, so you said that you've enjoyed all the games. Are there any particular ones that were very surprising, enlightening, mind-bending for you to discover among the other finalists?
I mean, yeah, they all look incredible, but I think the one that kind of maybe struck me from left field was Winter Rabbit. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that game, just the way it deals with and kind of thinks about history is really interesting, kind of taking a more kind of folklore attitude to it, I suppose, and how that ties into the kind of Cherokee way of thinking about history. I just think that's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to single it out because I think they all look amazing, and I'm just so excited about.
Wow, that's like the most popular answer. They all look really good.
But they do, though. I can verify so far. So, just a softball question: what games have you been enjoying lately yourself?
So I actually I played Regicide for the first time a couple of days ago. So I've really been enjoying that. Yeah, just what they do with a regular deck of cards is pretty incredible. I've also recently played my first game of Maria, which kind of blew me away. Like, just again, it's a deck of cards, isn't it? Yeah, the way it kind of deals with combat, with the kind of card play and the different squares with the different suits in. I really enjoy that.
What game is on your shelf you'll never get rid
of? Oh,
or
I'm gonna. Well, I'll say Root. It's there forever.
Wow.
It's just too pretty to get rid of.
That's fair. That's very fair. All right, so Joe, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. I'm personally super excited about this game. Where can people find you online if they have questions for you?
Well, I do have a Twitter. I don't use it very much, but so it's YUNGYLEK is my handle.
Excellent. And as y'all know, you can find me anywhere beyond Solitaire. You can find Mitch on No Dice, No Glory. And it has been our absolute pleasure to talk to you, Joe Kelly, designer of Molly House.
Oh, thanks for having me.
No problem. Yeah, this was awesome.
Happy gaming, everybody.